Good evening and welcome to Anupali. I am thrilled once again to have you join me on this program. As I mentioned last week, I am particularly concerned about the high incidence of non-communicable diseases in Dominica. And according to our health officials, non-communicable diseases constitute Dominica's dominant health problem, with diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, stroke, and cancer as some of the leading causes of death, illness, and disability in our country. Some of the main risk factors contributing to these diseases are obesity, unhealthy diet, physical inactivity, smoking, the harmful use of alcohol, and stress. In 2005, cerebrovascular disease, commonly referred to as stroke, was the leading cause of death here in Dominica, followed by hypertensive disease, referred to as high blood pressure, and of course, diabetes. According to the health statistics from 2013 to 2017, more females were diagnosed with diabetes, almost 2 to 1, and more males had amputations than females in the age group 55 to 59 years and 70 plus. This prevalence of NCDs, I believe, is an area of real concern that has implications for the health of our people and for our health services. It also holds implications for the economy, as more and more we are seeing productive members of our society affected by various ailments and their quality of life diminished. Your government continues to develop policies and put measures in place to improve the quality of life of every single Dominican. We continue to invest in the physical infrastructure of this country. We're building new roads, bridges, resilient homes, new health centers and hospitals, and we're about to embark on the construction of an international airport. But we will not enjoy these developments if we are not healthy. The health of the nation is a major preoccupation of mine, and this evening I have chosen to focus the discussion on diabetes and hypertension, the two conditions most common among our population. I have invited Dr. Lisa Jolly, a diabetes specialist, Dr. Andy St. Hilaire, medical officer, and Mrs. Mignon Roll Shillingford, the head of the Health Promotion Unit. Good evening and welcome to Anupali. I am happy you've accepted my invitation to be here to inform and educate the population on the prevalence of chronic non-communicable diseases in our country. Dr. Lisa Jolly, please welcome and tell us about yourself professionally.
So my name is Lisa Jolly. I'm Dr. Lisa Jolly. I am a general practitioner. However, I spent some time, at least a year, specializing in care of diabetic patients. At my local office, I provide comprehensive diabetes care, and that is care from head to toe for every patient who has diabetes. I also spend quite a bit of time advocating for improved care for persons who live with diabetes.
Thank you very much. Liz?
Yes, hello, good night. I'm PM, and good night to the listening public. I am Mrs. Mignon Roll Shillingford, a nurse by profession, a proud nurse, and also the coordinator of Health Promotion Unit. I'm also the focal point for NCDs for the Ministry of Health, Wellness, and New Health Investment. It's a pleasure to be here. I am an advocate for NCDs, and I want to share information every opportunity I get.
You've been a nurse for how long?
I've been a nurse since 1999. Okay. Yes.
Dr. St. Hilaire, please.
Yes, my name is Dr. Andy St. Hilaire. I am with the Department of Internal Medicine at PMH for the last eight years. And I am directly involved in the management of people with diabetes and high blood pressure.
Thank you. Welcome. So these are our guests tonight. They will be first, I suspect, for 2 hours. We have so many questions and so many things to discuss. But we'll see how it goes. We're here. Now, how do we define, Dr. Jolly, how do we define chronic non-communicable diseases? And what are some of the common ailments that fall under this bracket?
So the chronic non-communicable diseases are diseases whereby that are linked to lifestyle, likely poor diet and or inadequate exercise. The major ones include cardiovascular diseases, like you said earlier, stroke and heart attack. Cancer is also a chronic non-communicable diseases. And respiratory diseases such as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease that's related to tobacco smoke, and diabetes comprises 6%, which is a significant proportion of our patient population. So those are the chronic non-communicable diseases.
So I just wanted to add, and one of the NCDs that we often tend to forget is mental illness. So mental illness form part of these non-communicable diseases. And as we speak today, PM, this is an area I would love to speak a little about, because the very fact our mind controls every behavior, and behavioral change is so much important and significant in management of NCDs.
Sure. We will certainly touch on this during the discussion. This, I'll put a question to you. How prevalent are hypertension and diabetes in Dominica?
It's very prevalent. In fact, for over the past 10 to 15 years, diabetes and high blood pressure, which high blood pressure is part of the cardiovascular disease group, form part of the leading fifth leading cause of death among the population of Dominica. So that is significant enough. Also, when we look at persons who access healthcare systems, the services, predominantly the conditions with diabetes and high blood pressure. So that is very significant. And not to also talk about the complications associated, a number of premature deaths. And when we speak of premature deaths, we talk about people dying before the first content that the Bible speaks about, 70 premature deaths associated with diabetes and high blood pressure and its complications.
Dr. Sensile?
As a matter of fact, high blood pressure, 32.1% of our people suffer from high blood pressure, and equally between male and female. And for diabetes, there is a 17.1 prevalence in both sexes for diabetes. So it's real serious in our the number of people with high blood pressure and diabetes in Dominica.
Dr. Jolie, from your assessment, you were in the private sector.
Yes.
How much of a concern is this for the health of our nation?
This is of great concern. This is something that I wish we had started addressing perhaps more than 20 years ago. It affects every aspect of our country in terms of the economics. We know that folks who live with these conditions are not as productive as folks who are healthy. We also know that they take a significant amount of time away from work, either to deal with the illness or attending doctor's visits. And that, once again, these conditions affect the working age population. So these are the folks who are out there who are young and who are supposed to be healthy, but instead they're spending their time either going to the doctor or out sick. It also affects, the younger generation as well. And this is something that we have to be very worried about, because we have an instance where parents are becoming sick so early on that their young children have to sometimes step in to then take care of them or to assist them with their care. So it affects us in a number of ways. I'm definitely concerned about the economic impacts. I'm concerned about the impacts on our healthcare system and the healthcare infrastructure in the future. I'm concerned about the impact it's going to have in terms of our working population. And so it's something that we have to take very seriously.
No, thank you very much. Now, there is a view that these diseases are most often associated with older age people. Are the elderly the most at risk?
As you grow older, you're likely to develop one of the chronic non-communicable diseases, be it diabetes. All of these increase in prevalence as we age. However, one of the things that we've been seeing is that the folks who are being affected by these conditions are getting progressively younger and younger.
I see.
And so we are seeing younger people developing hypertension and diabetes. We are also seeing now where we have teenagers in the age group between 10 to 20 years old. It has arrived in the Caribbean. We have seen children, literally children, teenagers in the Caribbean, who are developing type 2 diabetes. And that's very scary because, one, they don't do as well, and they also develop the complications earlier on. So they head on to dialysis at age 40, in their 40s, which means that we are going to spend more keeping them alive for a longer period of time. And also it's going to affect their productivity in society significantly. And so this is not just for older folks. Everyone, from the child, the baby, everyone should be really concerned.
Nurse?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, well, just to take into perspective, because Dr. Jolly just mentioned type 2 diabetes. So for the population who's listening and wondering why is that so significant for us.
But can you define the type 2
Yes,
diabetes?
that's what I'm, yes. So I was just about, so they can appreciate our concern in terms of type 2 diabetes. So type 1 diabetes, which we call insulin diabetes, insulin dependent, is that the person who has it, and it normally happens in juvenile, in children, they either produce very little or no insulin at all. So that means that we have to give them insulin. The cause of it is really unknown. There are theories associated, but it's really unknown, as opposed to type 2 diabetes, which is called lifestyle diseases, meaning based on how you eat, whether you're active, whether you're obese, if you smoke or drink, and also it has some hereditary factors. So that means it may be passed on from your father and your mother. Now, this is the diabetes that we are beginning to see among children.
That's
and
correct.
before it was predominantly with older persons, and now we are seeing them with young persons. Also, what is diabetes? Simple. The fact that in this type 2 diabetes, you do produce insulin. But however, the insulin is unable to get to where it's needed to dissolve the sugar or turn it into energy. So your sugar keeps circulating very high in your body. And that way, we have to give you drugs that will cause this type of reaction to occur.
That's of great concern then. Dr. Skerrit, what are the risk factors though?
Well, there are many different risk factors. Smoking, alcohol use, not walking, just driving or moving from one place to another using the car. The diet is very, very important. And then genetics. Genetics, as black people, we are predisposed to diabetes and high blood pressure. So these are some of the risk factors, really.
Yeah. So we have to watch our diet.
We have to watch our diet. Yes. And then
consumption of alcohol.
Alcohol, because alcohol, I mean, in our society, every opportunity we get to CO, from womb to tomb, the baby is born, there is alcohol, and the diet, food rich in fats and stuff like that. So
you referenced the point that some people are genetically predisposed to these ailments, let's just say hypertension and diabetes. Can you tell us more about this, please?
Okay, so whether your father or mother in your gene, had conditions like diabetes, the likelihood of you getting those diseases are significantly increased. Also, there are conditions like polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is something a woman, experience, where one of the main signs and symptoms of this is insulin resistance, meaning that the same thing I mentioned, that your insulin, you do produce insulin. However, what happens, the insulin goes into the blood, reacts and takes this glucose into the cell where it can be used as energy. A resistance prevents that from happening. Right? So in terms of persons with their family history, and of course, if we have a family history, Plus, we have conditions like PCOS, and we still do not maintain the type of lifestyle. We drink, we smoke tobacco, we do not exercise, we eat foods that are healthy. We can only imagine what happens.
Yes, Dr. Jolie?
I would like to add that one of the conditions is diabetes in pregnancy, or what we refer to as gestational diabetes. And one of the worrying things about that is that the changes actually happen for the baby while the baby is in the mother's womb. So here it is, you have a woman who is pregnant and who has high blood sugars or who has diabetes during pregnancy. She's actually programming that baby for diabetes as well. Another part of it, genetics plays a big role, but also we learn to eat as families. So we sit at the table and we tend to eat all the same food. So we create the habits, our eating habits, when we sit and eat with our families. And so that's one thing that we have to be concerned about, because I always tell my patients that your genes are not your destiny, meaning that just because you have a family history of diabetes doesn't mean that you will develop it. However, you have to take a look at your family's lifestyle, because not only do we learn to eat the way our family does, we learn to move the way our family does. And so if our family is not an active family who's out there and who moves and who sits and watch TV, or probably physically inactive, chances are we will be too.
In terms of family, there was a survey done a few years ago that showed that 57.2% of our people have a first cousin, a relative who has high diabetes. So that is very serious in Dominica, in our setting. So one has to be very careful in terms of how they move along.
So I'm hearing diet plays a major role in prevention.
Absolutely.
That's correct.
It's absolutely. It's the best prevention.
So we have to be mindful of the consumption of salt, sugar.
Yes.
We often hear of eat what you grow,
Yes.
and grow what we eat.
Yes.
We hear of natural juices vis-a-vis sodas, and we also sometimes are not fully informed about natural sugars. I mean, can we speak to this? Because you hear people say, "Well, I am not taking sugar, but I use honey
Yes.
in my tea," or I'm diabetic, so what I do, I don't take sugar, I don't eat ice cream, but I eat 2 or 3 ripe bananas a day.
Yes.
Can we speak to these things, please?
So.
Please, anyone.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I address in my office, because a lot of times you're right. People think that the natural sugars or the fruits are better or healthier. And to a certain extent, it's better to eat a fruit compared to eating a processed food like ice cream or cookie. But certainly, natural sugars do raise your blood sugar as well. And so you have to be cautious. And so what you have to do is limit the portion sizes. And so the 4 main fruits that raise the blood sugar quite a bit are watermelon, grapes. Those have what we call the high glycemic index. So they raise the blood sugar quite fast. So if you have a low blood sugar, then you can grab a piece of watermelon or grape. However, if you have diabetes, then you ought to limit your portion size. The other 2 include banana and mangoes. And I know during mango season, everybody's blood sugar is high. And so even though mangoes are great to eat, we still want you to limit it to at least 1 or 2 a day, and perhaps not sit down with the bucket, by the beach or the river.
Many people know about this, you know.
Yeah.
I totally agree with Dr. Jolie in terms of how we choose to eat and to eat foods that have high glycemic indexes. One of the things we promote is that you eat the fruit and you drink the water. So even in terms of local juices, some persons say, "Oh, I'm not drinking soda, but I will drink my juice," But who knows the concentration of sugar that you put into the juice? And a lot of times we put sugar based on taste.
Yes.
So when we taste it sweet enough, that's when we stop. But by then it is loaded with grams of sugar. Okay, so we want to promote that persons eat the fruit and drink the water. And as it said, that too much of anything is good for nothing. So our main thing is portion sizes and moderation. Another thing that happens among our family plate is that when we look at our plate of food, we have so many pies: macaroni pie, potato pie, fig pie, macaroni salad. And then when you look, the whole plate is predominant carbs. And we also want to say that things like beans, which we also add, has some starch. So that's an additional. So they'd say, you know, I just have 4 pieces of pie, you know, and then my legumes and my chicken. But even energy comes from the other parts of the food. You know, even the protein food. So that's what we have to concentrate on. Moderation is key.
I see. No, good, please.
But one of the things that we tend to leave out are the vegetables. So we tend to eat too much starch and not eat enough vegetables. And that's one of the things that we have here in abundance in Dominica. And so really and truly, we really shouldn't have any excuse for not eating enough vegetables, you know.
Dr. Hilly?
Yes.
Centile, sorry?
Same thing. We in terms of a Sunday meal, the Sunday meal is packed with all this food, starchy foods and vegetables. You get very little vegetables in the plate, you know, and chicken or meats and so on. So that creates a problem for the system.
But we have a challenge, you know. We are to eat right, maintain a certain diet, watch the portions of carbohydrates you have, exercise. But we have a stigma and a cultural view that you have to be thick, you have to.
Yes.
You know, I mean, guys out there, a lot of guys out there like they're really thick, and I mean, and if you have a weight and you start losing some pounds because you're watching your diet, and so people saying, look, I think you're getting a little too small. I mean, I have cut the consumption of sugar by 75%, and reduced on the carbs and so on. That's why I'm looking slim and trim, you know, on TV and so on. But there are people saying, Skerrit, look, you're getting too small, you know, I mean, put the weight back on. How do we help people, though, and help the society understand that we have to manage our weight and manage and control what we eat?
Education, education, education. And what we're doing here is sending the information out to the people, if it means a cultural shift in terms of what we perceive to be thick, sexy, and good. So we have to educate our people. And we have to start from small, in the primary schools, from the very early age, to educate and have a mind shift.
On this?
Yes, I totally agree with Dr. Centile, and that is why we have developed a school nutrition policy that will change it's aimed to change the behaviors and attitude from our children from the primary school ages. What that will do will, for one, if we can go into the HFLE curriculum, for example, and change and introduce healthy eating and meal planning, how you eat your food. And after we would go into the schools through the HFLE, then through our school feeding program, we will do demonstration. So the way we would feed the children would be exactly how their plate should look like. What portion of fat, what sugar, what carbohydrate, what proteins. Apart from that, it also addresses physical activities in school. How many minutes per day? How many minutes per day? How many times per week? Having the accommodations and the equipment. It speaks to the sale and the ban of sugary drinks at school. You know, in terms of, we have to say it as it is. Sometimes the schools themselves sell soda as a form of fundraising. You know, these are the type of things that need to stop. You know, so that is why this school nutrition policy have been done and needs to be implemented. Because I'm totally in agreement that we need to start from the very small kids.
So where are we with this policy?
Well, the policy has been done and, of course, handed over to the Ministry of Education. So the Ministry of Health did it with collaboration with Education, and now it has been passed over and it needs to be approved.
I'm sure we'll take a note of this. It's a major concern. You know, of managing what we eat in this country and drink.
Yes.
But in addition to the education in the schools, we have to also educate the parents at home as well. Because the tendency is that even though you teach them to do the right things at school, if they go home and they see something different, then there's a lot of confusion. And also the fact that some of the schools sell sugar-sweetened beverages and concentrated sweets, it's misleading.
So we have a caller. Hello, good evening.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Please.
Hello? Mr. PM.
Yes, sir.
Can you please call me after the program, please?
Okay, we'll take note of that. Okay, thank you. No problem. Okay. So we really have to have a comprehensive program and approach to this because it's a major concern here. Now, do we see, in terms of the society, do we see a greater prevalence of CNCDs among the vulnerable groups in our community? Or is it across the board?
It is across the board. It is across the board. While the vulnerable groups, there is a sharp increase, but it is across the board. So we have to be aware of the different people and what happens and how they live their lives. So we intervene at a certain time to prevent it from moving from one level to the next.
So yes, we see increases in diabetes and hypertension among the vulnerable groups, but much more in terms of persons we term at risk population, and they may be at risk based on their employment or unemployment, based on their income, based on their economic status, their education, and all of this. So of course, this at-risk population, we are seeing a definite increase in terms of these NCDs. Children, persons who work in very stressful jobs like UPM in your areas, your cabinet ministers.
Yeah, I'm watching that. Yeah,
yes, and that is why from the Health Promotion Unit, we would love to come in and have these types of session with you as well in terms of your cabinet members to ensure that you remain safe and practice. Yes, yes. You know, so persons with these types of jobs, persons who work in equipment industry where they have to manage higher, traffic and, equipment and all of these. All these people we consider high risk. People who work in industries where there's a lot of alcohol happening. And we know our likeliness, especially as with our masculinity men, would tend not to take medication and take a shot with the boys.
Sure.
I think we're all vulnerable here in Dominica. We are all, as a matter of fact, we're probably all vulnerable in the Caribbean in general. And also, because most of the folks who live in Dominica of African ancestry, that alone makes us vulnerable. Also, the food that we consume culturally and locally, remember, we have food coming in as a nation. To a great extent, we share the same cultural practices. We also tend to eat the same foods around festivals, whether it's Creole time or whether it's Carnival time. So I always say there are only two sets of folks currently in Dominica, probably across the world. You either have diabetes or you're on your way to develop it. We have people who are more vulnerable because of their socioeconomic status, where their income may not allow them to purchase fruits and vegetables every week. They may not have access.
So this is where they have to, we need to get them to grow what they eat.
Backyard gardening.
Backyard gardening, that's important.
That's right. So and I've found that many people who live in the country areas, I'm always surprised when folks come to me from what I consider the country areas, and they tell me that they can't get access to vegetables, and they have to come to town to purchase those vegetables, which they may not do so every week. And also because of their education, that might limit their interpretation. Again, they might just go after what tastes good. And so I think your income determines a lot of what you eat, because again, the high calorie stuff tends to be cheaper, and also we tend to buy. Sometimes they tend to buy more processed stuff because that's more shelf stable. So they might say, well, I'm not going to buy the fruits and vegetables because they rot quicker, and they might prefer to buy the canned stuff that are more shelf stable, which are less healthy.
Now, earlier on, we referenced the issues with our children and the obesity levels. You said we've seen an increase in this at the schools. I mean, how can we reverse this troubling trend? What kind of actions can we take?
Again, it depends. A lot of the children, they go to school with Cheetos, and so what for the recess, what they eat. So we have to start there. As Nurse said, in the schools there are juices that are very sweet that are being sold to them. So we have to start to change this culture and get things that are much healthier for the children. Exercise is another thing. When I was in school, phys ed was a must. You had to leave and do jumping jacks and so on. No, it's not lesson. You have to go and do a test and so on. Phys ed is actually taught. So these are some of the things that...
So, go ahead, please.
We need to eliminate the sale as well of sugar-sweetened beverages to children across schools in Dominica. Sugar-sweetened beverages, whether they are sodas or processed juices, should not be sold or given to children across Dominica. Those have a lot of sugar, and that's a gateway. Sodas lead directly to diabetes, without a shadow of a doubt. And if we look at looking at the schools is part of it. But the other part of it, we have to look at what's around the school, because part of what you eat is what is in your environment.
Correct.
And if we look at the schools across Dominica, there's a shop nearby each school, maybe 2, maybe 3, that sells either sugar-sweetened beverages or other concentrated sweets, either candies or chocolates, to the children. And that is a practice we have to change. Like Dr. Skerrit said, physical activity also plays a role. Most children do not get the recommended 60 minutes of physical activity every day across schools in Dominica. The other part of it are the electronic devices, the screens. So most children are going to school, but also they're spending a significant amount of time sedentary, watching screens, whether it be TV screen, iPad screen, iPod screen, tablet screen, you name it, some other sort of screen that renders them sedentary. So we need to do 2 things. We need to look at their intake at school, what is being sold at the school level, as well as what is allowed into the school for them to eat. Also what is, I understand sometimes they sell pizzas and cakes and stuff like that. And then we also need to work on the physical activity.
But we also made mention of the homes as well.
Exactly.
Very, very important. Maybe the most important place. We have a telephone call, please. Hello.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, sir. Now, it is said that your blood sugar should be 110, and that which is kind of normal. But there's another school of thought that seems to suggest that if you go to sleep and your blood sugar is lower than 140, and it goes down to about 8, you can go stroke. Can you speak to that and give us some information? Thank you very much.
Okay. So your fasting blood sugar, meaning sugar after an 8-hour fast, meaning that you haven't had anything to eat, should be about 100. So anywhere between 70 to 130. That's normal. So fasting blood sugar first thing in the morning between 70 to 130. 1 to 2 hours after a meal, it's supposed normal is less than 180. So your blood sugar is never supposed to be 200. If you go to sleep and let's say you don't have diabetes, you have your supper, you go to sleep, your blood sugar will go down overnight to maybe in the 80s or stuff like that. But that should not cause a stroke. That should not cause a stroke. And if you're on diabetes medication and you take your medication and your blood sugar goes low overnight, then that's something you need to address with your doctor, because that's called low blood sugar or hypoglycemia. So that's a different story. Yes.
Now, in Dominica, our alcohol consumption, as we indicated earlier, is very high. We have the episodic periods of Carnival, Independence, Christmas, and of course you have a whole set of activities during the week and weekends in Dominica. And then there are those who drink practically every single day. How much of a factor is the consumption of alcohol to the chronic non-communicable diseases of hypertension and diabetes?
It is very much a factor because the abuse or the use of alcohol that is above the recommended daily intake, and what I said by recommended, we talk of 1 drink in females, and that is about a 8-ounce glass of wine, a beer, and 2 drinks in males, which is 2 beers or 2 8-ounce glasses of wine. That this is the recommended. And it's also recommended that you may not drink this every single day, meaning 7 days. You may drink it at least 5 days and 2 days without having any alcohol at all. What we are seeing happening is that sometimes persons may not drink for the week. And for the weekend, they say, well, I was supposed to drink 2 per day, so they drink 8 on the weekend. And this sometimes is exactly what it takes to cause the disruption in the body. You know, alcohol affects almost every single organ in the body. Just by it entering in your mouth, how do you know that you're taking alcohol? You feel that inflammatory process, it's hot. And most time you feel it all the way down into your stomach. So inflammation, it causes burning and irritation. And that continues to all of your organs. So that alone tells you that it is doing some form of damage. Another thing, we are not talking about cancer, but all of us have cancer cells, right, in the body. And sometimes that day you do binge drinking, and a lot of people do binge drinking. So for the weekend, they actually say they're going to kill their liver. My liver dead this weekend, you know, and they drink, and it might be just that weekend when you take the 8 glasses of whiskey or whatever, you develop some form of cancer.
And in addition to that, there are patients who stop medication. They will stop the medication. This weekend they're not taking any medication because the CO is drinking. And that can have an effect on the patients as well.
Now, the health statistics, and we're referencing the statistics from 2013, 2017, indicate that more women are diagnosed with diabetes. Why is that the case?
Women, there are several factors that actually lead to that. Their body type, the sex hormones, the way that it reacts in female than male is different. So they are predisposed. There is PCOS, and so the women, and then the way the fat is in the female body can predispose women to diabetes much more than
I think there are far more women coming forward for healthcare. So I think, and also we see them for pregnancy and for when they were taking care of the children. And so they are more likely to be diagnosed because they interact more with the healthcare team more frequently. Like you said, yes, they're body habitants, but also, I think also more in the Caribbean in general, like you said, men like their women a little round. And so the tendency is that as they get older, they become less physically active. That's another story. So they become a little round, and so they tend to gain weight to either, appear more physically attractive, and that puts them at risk. Also, pregnancy itself is a state that in which diabetes can show up. We call it a diabetogenic state. So that's another risk factor. But I think also physical activity. In the Caribbean, as young women, we're not trained to be as physically active. So we tend that we're to be kept inside, maybe doing housework or taking care of our education, and whenever we do physical activity, something aerobic. But in the way that boys are encouraged to play sports, be it football or basketball, we're not trained to do that. And there seems to be somewhat of a fear of heavy physical activity, whether it's lifting weights at the gym. We see that as something that is a desire, it's a male trait rather than a female trait. And so these are just things that we really need to change in our mind.
Someone is asking a question via WhatsApp. It says, good evening to all. My question is, why when a diabetic person's sugar drop low, they must take sugar to bring it up?
And so if a person has diabetes and they take medications, one of the common side effects is that their blood sugar may go low. which is a blood sugar less than 70. And one of the easiest ways is to take a tablespoonful of sugar, either in water, to increase it. That's important because our brain can only work on sugar. And so if your blood sugar goes low for too long, you could possibly die. I tell folks one high blood sugar will not kill you, but one low can. So it's important that we know that, and so we take care of it.
Now, the report of 2013-2017 also indicate that more men are undergoing amputations directly related to diabetes and other aggravating factors. Is there a reason for this greater prevalence among men?
Most definitely, and I'm looking at Mr. Centilier, he being a man, wanting him to answer that question, but it has to do with how men access or how they do not access healthcare services. And I think we started speaking of it already, the fact that our women tend to be more in the health centers, more by the doctor. A woman might, feel a pain or something is happening to them, and they may quickly access health services, but the men might downplay it. So they may say, oh, it's a gas. A lot of time it's a gas, and I'm just going to go to the gym and I'm going to work that out, time I go tomorrow. And these may be simple things that may be telling them that something is happening, right? But they do not go to seek help, and by the time they reach, it is very late. And the end result may be an amputation. And Prime Minister, I just want to say and explain to persons why diabetes can cause an amputation. So, of course, one of the two main complications of uncontrolled diabetes is nerve damage and poor circulation. So if you have diabetes and it is uncontrolled, it affects how the blood flows through your body. And because your legs, your extremities are the furthest points, these are the areas which we most at risk. It also affects your nerve, and the nerves, that's where we feel things. Right, Dr. Jolie?
That's
we feel.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are diabetic and you are not controlling your diabetes, you have poor circulation in your legs. That means that when the heart beats and the blood goes down to your legs, it does not come back as soon as it should. So it settles down there a bit. And that causes things like blebs, pus, pustules in the skin. Also, if you may get a cut or injury and your nerve have been infected, you do not feel it. And that is where we get the ulcers and the amputation. So apart from that, one of the main things affecting diabetics is the eye, the retina, diabetic retinopathy. So just think of this a minute. You do not control your diabetes. It affects your eyes. That means you have visual impairment. You're unable to see properly. It affects your circulation in your extremities. And then it also affects your nerve, that the fact that if you get an injury on your foot that you may not know, and you may not be able to see it properly as well. And by the time you come first, you have a big ulcer. So that is what happened. And with our men, if they do not take care of themselves and control, by the time they come sometimes, doctor have to amputate.
In addition to that as well, foot care is important. Women have a tendency to be looking at the foot more often, going to get pedicures and manicures and so on, so they are aware of what is going down. There was a study that showed that 90% of men do not really look at the foot, pay attention to it. And that can actually cause problems, ulcers being formed and so on. As well, there is a study that shows height is a factor. So some men are much taller, and then the nerves that feed is much longer. So it predisposes that injury. So when these nerves get damaged, then these guys cannot feel anything. There was a guy who had a nail in his foot for 2 days and did not know that. Right. So these are some of the factors.
We have a question here on WhatsApp. It says, would the government consider raising the sales tax on alcohol and cigarettes and sugary drinks in an effort to discourage consumption? We no longer have sales tax, but we have value-added tax, so we could say value-added tax. We've done this before with we've increased on this, but you know, when people want something and it's available, sometimes they don't pay attention to the cost, financial costs, or also the health risk. So I think it's something that we can put on the table again, but we've done that a couple of times in the Parliament. I'm not sure what some of you think in respect to your advice to the government on this.
Most definitely, PM. And this will form part of the multiple strategies that will be used in improving people's health. One of the things we have to do is
So you're for the government
I'm totally
increasing the tax on alcohol, cigarettes, sugary drinks?
Most definitely.
And there's-
It has shown internationally and through study that if you increase taxation on these risk factors of NCDs, it will decrease demand.
Yeah, I've seen the study by Power. Power was done.
And onset of new users.
Yes.
I see.
Yes. So this, yes. Go ahead, Dr.
So there is good evidence that increasing the taxes on sugary drinks does reduce their consumption. And a couple countries has done it before. I believe Mexico was one of them. Mexico, I believe, is one of the most obese countries in the world. And they increased the taxes on sugar-sweetened beverages, and it has reduced the consumption of those beverages as well. But it's not, we should not think of it as a single measure. There's lots of other things that have to go along with that as well.
Because there's always an argument that the tax on 100% juice is higher than on these sugary drinks. And I think this was done back in the days in a bid to protect local farmers. So I believe it's something that we really need to revisit and to ensure that people can have adequate access to better juices than those sugary drinks. But we note your advice, we note your question, and we note the advice of the panel. Now, what advice do you have for family members, though? What can family members do to assist members of the family who are suffering from one of these ailments? If somebody were to go into a diabetic coma, for example, you know, what should we do? You know, how do we know when your sugar is low or your sugar is high? And in these instances, what can we do? Somebody's getting a stroke. What are some of the actions we can take, both preventive and also reactionary measures?
So one of the things that I really like is that when folks come to me, you know, I like when the entire family comes, because when one person has diabetes in the family, then everybody has diabetes. And I've seen numerous instances where the husband has diabetes. It's either the husband has diabetes, the wife is on her way to developing diabetes, or they both have diabetes. Frequently, it's mother and daughter or mother and son. So the reality is that diabetes is not, anybody who's living with diabetes is not, they're not alone. They are surrounded by family members who have the similar conditions. And even in children who have type 1 diabetes, the entire family has to look at their diet and has to change their diet in order to accommodate that one child. So the lifestyle changes, which include the changes in the diet and as well as the physical activity, is for everybody in the family. And that's a good thing, because a diabetic lifestyle is not a restrictive lifestyle. It's really a healthy lifestyle that we should all follow. The other part of the most important thing that the family has to do is to really educate themselves on the condition. They have to know a little bit about the condition. They have to be able, one of the life-saving techniques that they can learn is to how to check the blood sugar, which is such a important and could be a life-saving skill, because it can tell you whether the family member's blood sugar is low and how to address it, whether it's to give that person a teaspoonful of sugar or a tablespoonful of honey. They also need to be aware what it looks like, because it can be quite scary if somebody's blood sugar is low. And likewise, if the person's blood sugar is high, then they need to be able to support that family member. There are lots of family members across Dominica who help their elderly parents or their sisters or brothers administer insulin. And so these are, you know, really skills that they should all learn and be familiar with, because the other part of diabetes as well is the support. They need the support of the family in order to do well. People who have more support do better.
So let us take a call. Caller, please. Good evening.
Yes, good evening. Good evening. Yes, fantastic and a very important thing. Good evening to everyone.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Just some observations I've made is that one of the early signs that one can tell whether one is diabetic or becoming diabetic is a loss of the postprandial dip. Okay, when they essentially a people person, when they have when they consume a high carbohydrate meal, the pancreas secretes an excess amount of insulin, which causes them to feel drowsy after the meal. We have different names we call it, but the actual name is postprandial dip. So when people start to lose that postprandial dip, that would be an early sign that they're pre-diabetic or becoming diabetic. That's one thing. The other thing I also noticed is that the amputations, the question you had about why more men are amputated, essentially has a very significant thing that has to do with the fact that many of the men are more outdoor people, and a lot of the infections they get are what they call anaerobic infections, infections that are caused by bacteria that do not depend on oxygen. You see, so then they because they may have more contact with the soil than most women would have, and so they tend to get amputations earlier because the antibiotics cannot deal with the bacteria that are hidden deep within the tissues that are thriving on an anaerobic environment. And one of the most important tools with that, and I keep calling about that, is the hyperbaric oxygen, which is one of the limb and life-saving treatments. And oxygen is free, it's cheaper than most of the antibiotics you have to use to save one limb. But using the hyperbaric oxygen, you're able to kill the bacteria, which is the anaerobic bacteria, which is thriving within the deep tissues, which are essentially devoid or low in oxygen. Okay, that's one of the things I wanted to say. The other thing also I wanted to mention was with the hypoglycemia, there's a move away from hypoglycemia just treating with sugar. Because what you do with the sugar is that you get them to become dependent on these swings, and it's the swings of going from low to high that cause the most damage. When you get sudden surges and drops of the sugar, the blood glucose, by especially the sucrose, which is the artificial sweetener, as opposed to fructose, which is a balanced system. So this sucrose causes the damage to the organs, end organs, as well as gets the people into a false sense of overdiagnosing the hypoglycemia. Okay? So the more recent thing would be to use the ketogenic diet. The ketones, the brain can survive very well on ketones. So getting the patients on a ketogenic diet, you can actually have them way down. Their blood sugars can be in the 30s and 40s, but yet their brain is surviving very well on the ketones when they're in a ketogenic state, as opposed to just being in a hypoglycemic state. So it would actually save a lot on the strokes, etc. The other thing also is that it has been proven over and over now that cancer cells thrive greater in a high glycemic environment. So things like, for instance, having the high, they'll be more predisposed to cancers. Okay, whereas if you put them on a ketogenic diet, the cancer cells do not tend to thrive as well. Okay, so we can start revolutionizing these things. So and then the next thing I wanted to talk about was the children. This is a fantastic opportunity with the COVID. We look at COVID as a negative, but it's a fantastic opportunity for school children to be outdoors, doing their classes outdoors, for the teachers to be outdoors doing in a non-confined area where there's a lower risk of spread anything. But there's no reason why, and like I keep saying, there's no reason why children in the Caribbean should not be the best at everything aquatic. Why can't they learn their physics, learning to sail, learning to windsurf, learning the marine biology, learning to snorkel, to do those things, actually having the hands-on? They already have Dominica is a massive lab for them, a living lab. Why can't they learn, instead of learning from the book, why can't they learn the actual work outdoors? Learn the physics, the biology, the chemistry, pick up water from the rivers, look at it under the microscope. All these things are just ways that they can be active as well as get them off the screens and get them in an environment which is a low risk for spreading the COVID. And they can also learn more about the country.
Thank you. Thank you,
So
caller.
in a nutshell, like I said, the hyperbarics, getting the chamber back in order, the ketogenic diet, teaching people how to check by just watching their post prandial dip to make sure that if they notice that they're no longer feeling sleepy after a meal, then they should take that as a warning sign, and I hope some of these may help to stimulate something.
Thank you very much.
But I think the hyperbarics is a good thing. Okay, thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you very much. Any reaction, Dr. Jolly?
Well, I do agree with him that we have a great environment, and I think that it's for kids in terms of learning outdoors, and I think that's one of the things that we can not only do for our local children, but we should really market to everyone, really. So I'll agree with him on that one.
Now, Dr. Jolly, what advice can you give in terms of basic diabetes care, especially with regards to the management of diabetic soul, which appears to be a major concern, a precursor to amputations?
Okay. So amputations, the most frequent cause of a non-traumatic amputation anywhere in the world is diabetes. A matter of fact, I didn't know this until I did my further training, but apparently Barbados is the amputation capital of the world. And given the fact that we're only, an hour away, that tells us something about where we are as well. The most important thing really in terms of the preventing the amputations is, well, one, taking care of the diabetes. So you must take care of the diabetes. You can't take care of any diabetes complication, whether it is the nerve issues, the amputations, the eye problems, or the kidney problems, if you're not taking care of the diabetes. So you have to be extremely aggressive with the diabetes. What has been shown is that keeping the hemoglobin A1C, which is making sure that the average blood sugars over the 3-month period of time is less than 7%, prevents these complications, whether it's the eye complications, the kidney complications, or the feet complications. And that's something you have to do early, and you have to do for as long as possible. The other part of it is general foot care. One of the things I encourage all my patients to do is to simply take a look at their feet. So when you have your shower every day, twice a day, look at your feet. Make sure there are 2 feet there and 10 toes. You also want to, while you're drying in between the toes, you want to look and see exactly what's in between the toes. Diabetics frequently develop fungal infections between the toes, and what happens is that the skin, eventually the skin cracks, and that's where the bacteria enter. And so it's important to look in between the toes. Look underneath the feet as well. Make sure that if you have any corns or calluses, make sure that's something that you address as well. You want to be very careful when washing your feet. You don't want to use anything that is too abrasive, but you want to look at your feet. And if you see anything that is suspicious, anything whatsoever, then you want to make your doctor aware as soon as possible. Because the other thing I've seen is that when you address it early, you can actually prevent the amputations or the other complications. The other simple thing that we can always do is to wear shoes, regardless of whether you're inside your house or you go outside. Wear shoes every day. I allow folks to wear slippers inside of their house, but once you go outside, you must be wearing a closed shoe, something close to a sneaker. That's what you want to wear. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be wearing slippers outside, because frequently what happens, the slippers or sandals, is that if you have nerve issues, those can come off and you will not be aware of it. Mm-hmm. And so you could step on a nail, you could walk on hot coal tar, and you will not be aware of it. Mm-hmm. So you want to get a good sneaker that you wear, preferably with white socks. And then when you take them off, you come home and you take them off, you want to look at your feet. And if you are obese and you're not able to look at the feet, Then you put a mirror on the ground and you put your foot above it and you take a look at the feet. Those simple things helps to prevent diabetic foot ulcers. So you want to wash your feet every day. You want to look at your feet. You want to wear shoes both inside and outside of the house. And if it is that you notice something with your foot, you want to bring it to the attention of your healthcare provider as soon as possible.
Yes, you have anything to add to this?
Yes, and also especially for our ladies, when we speak of wearing our shoes, you have to wear comfortable shoes. So you see those pointy toe shoes where your foot is squeezed into it for looks, we need to cut that out. Okay, so if you suffer with diabetes, wear comfortable shoes. The pointy toe shoes are not suitable for you, especially if your foot, because they give corns and sometimes they give abrasions and callus on the foot, and that is when it makes the white thing. Yes, that is it. And these are the things that can develop into ulcers later. So not just wearing shoes, but comfortable, well-fitted shoes. If you are size 10, wear size 10.
No, thank you very much. Now, Dr. Skerrit, we also see from these conditions as hypertension and diabetes, several offshoots, such as kidney disease. How prevalent are these offshoots?
Kidney disease is a serious problem with us here in Dominica. As a matter of fact, the dialysis unit at the hospital, currently there are 40 patients on dialysis. In the clinic itself, there are more than 50 people or more in the clinic at different stages of kidney disease. This is, in terms of pricing, what the cost at PMH, 1/3 of the total costing of PMH goes to dialysis. And Dominica, I think, is the only country in the OECS that allows dialysis in the public sector. Most of the other islands, I think, it's in the private sector because of the costing. So the government of Dominica must be commended for that, actually, because it's a serious problem. What we are having now with the dialysis, in terms of the patients, they are on the machine for 3 to 4 hours. There are 2 cycles: Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And these patients, if they have to travel overseas, they have to make sure wherever they are going, there is a service available to them to be dialyzed. So it is a serious problem in our country in terms of the renal disease.
Okay, so PM, we spoke about diabetes and kind of explain to the public what happens exactly during diabetes, and we are also speaking about hypertension and high blood pressure. So when we say you have high blood pressure, your pressure is high, what happens is that there is a resistance or additional pressure being put on your blood vessels. So for instance, the heart pumps the blood, right, Dr. Skerrit? And it goes all through your veins and arteries and blood vessels. What happens with hypertension, for some reason, whether it's because of buildup of plaque, because of cholesterols, or any other thing, then the blood is being forced through. Okay, so there's a resistance through these blood vessels. And remember, all of our major organs require blood. We were just speaking of renal failure. This is where the blood is filtered and all of the toxins and what is not needed by the body is removed. So that means there's a large supply of blood that goes to the kidney. And this constant pressure, let's just think of our arteries and veins like our PVC pipes at home. When we throw down all the grease and the oil and all of that, it forms muck in the drain pipes. And what will happen after we consistently do that? It will get blocked, right? And then sometimes there's a pressure and it might cause the pipe to burst. And that is what happens when our kidney becomes damaged. That consistent pressure that goes, it damages the kidney. That's what happens when we get strokes. That constant pressure, either we have a blockage because of the plaque or it bursts and rupture because of that pressure. When we have heart problems, and all of these are associated with high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, heart problem, is because the blood is not getting through these blood vessels as much as it needs to. So it's blocked by this plaque. And then the brain tells the heart to beat faster. If you beat faster, then more blood will be circulated to where it's needed. But when we overwork ourselves, what happens? We get it big, it gets enlarged, it gets tired, and then we damage our heart. So that is what happens with high blood pressure. The resistance, there's a constant resistance and a tension going through those blood vessels.
Now, it brings us now to the question of the issue of medicine compliance and scheduling and access to that medication, especially among men. Are patients taking their medication on time,
No.
as they should? The simple answer to this is no.
No,
An
they
emphatic no.
No, they are not taking their medications as directed. Some, and some of them are not taking any medications whatsoever. And there are lots of reasons why that happens. I see patients all the time. They take their medication from Monday to Friday, and again, because they have to party on the weekend, then they stop their medication. Sometimes they may not understand from the first visit that these are medications that they have to take every day until they are told to stop.
And no, we see that both for men and women. Is that correct?
Yes,
But more so in men.
Men. More so in men.
Yes, I think on both sides.
Both sides.
Yes, I think so. And sometimes they don't understand that they have to go get a refill for their medication. So they initially might get a month's worth, and they may not go for a refill. And there are a multitude of reasons. Sometimes it's health literacy, so they may not understand, or we also as doctors and nurses, we need to be better at explaining to them that your pressure is high. This is a chronic condition. You have high blood pressure. This is a chronic condition. This is something that you will have for the rest of your life, and so you need to take medication to help manage or to help your body tolerate these higher blood pressures until you are told not to do so. I think we have to be better at educating our patients about the common side effects of the medication. And we need to also be better about asking them at their visit if they're experiencing those side effects, so that if they are, then we know that we can change to an alternative form if that is an issue. And also if they have issues in terms of accessing the medication, whether it's too expensive, or they have problems in terms of transportation and going back and forth to the health center, then we really should make it easier for them. Because once they develop these complications, whether it's the kidney issues or whether it's the heart issues associated with high blood pressure, it actually costs more to manage these conditions. And oftentimes it doesn't get better. And so we really need to be more proactive from the get-go in terms of managing their high blood pressure.
Now, with regards to men, and I've met a lot of men out there who are hypertensive, but do not want to take a medication because it affects their, it causes erectile dysfunction for many of them. What advice do we have? Because my understanding is that there are different types of medication that one could access. Do we have some good news for the men out there so that we can encourage them to take their medication?
Well, even before the medication, the hypertension and diabetes itself can cause erectile dysfunction. So outside of medication, and there are a few tablets, there are a few medication that can cause that. So in my clinic, when they come, they will tell me, Doc, I have a problem there. So I look at what they have, and then we have discussion. So we will change and move from one thing to another. But they have to be aware that just having high blood pressure and diabetes can affect the erectile problem.
No, do we have a challenge with access to medication?
I do. I believe we do have an access in terms of challenge. It's challenging to access the probably the better medications. I think that's an issue, and also I think we have to look at.
Is it that we do not have the better medication here, or it's here and some people have difficulty accessing it?
It's here, but they are more expensive.
More expensive.
They are more expensive, and but also we have the other issues that I think we have to look at doing, because again, these conditions, you'll have them for the rest of your life. If we're able to do 3 months prescriptions as opposed to month by month, then I think we would increase compliance or adherence to the medication regimen. Because sometimes it's hard. Remember, people are out there living their lives. They're out there, taking their kids to school. They're out there living, partying, they're out there working. And so, some of them don't have the time every month to come to the pharmacy or to go to the health center, sometimes waiting long lines to get their medication. And so one of the big things with compliance, particularly in Dominica, would be easier access and certainly making the medications more affordable would be helpful.
The other thing I have come across is there are many people who prescribe medication, but they stop taking it and they go to herbs. So herbal medication, and a lot of the times it is not enough. So they end up with serious problems out of the diabetes and high blood pressure.
I see. I know in 2017 we increased the pharmaceutical budget by $5 million, all of which was in relation to addressing access to medication for chronic non-communicable diseases. So it's a huge cost. I think it takes up over 25% of the budget in the government system, treatment of chronic non-communicable diseases. Now, we have a question there from WhatsApp, and it says, good evening. My question is, what should one do if while at their residence they suffer a high blood sugar level, I guess? Since you mentioned that during a low blood sugar episode, a teaspoon of sugar should be taken.
So the only reason if you notice a high blood sugar, then you should definitely see your doctor as soon as possible. If it's very high, let's say it's above 300, 400, 500, or the meter doesn't have a reading, which is not a good sign, then you should probably head to the casualty as soon as possible. But yes, if you have a high blood sugar, that should be addressed as soon as possible. If it can wait, it's not too high, then 200, then you could wait to see your primary care doctor or your general practitioner. But if it's very high, that needs to be taken care of immediately.
Okay, so we've gotten the response here. Now, we're told that people with NCDs are at greater risk from COVID-19. Not getting it, but at greater risk of it. Can you talk to us about this and why?
Okay, so what we have seen and through all studies is that persons who have non-communicable diseases and persons who are older persons are the ones who have been getting most complications associated. So I just want to say that everyone is at risk, PM, of getting COVID, but in terms of complications, death, ending up in critical care, heart problems, renal problems, are persons with, because the fact is that their immune system, for one, is already weakened by the diabetes or the high blood pressure. In some cases, different organs are already damaged. And of course, these are the reasons why they tend to have more critical cases and also more deaths associated
with them. Okay, we will go to a couple minutes break, and we'll come back with Dr. Jolly, Nurse Sridford, and Dr. St. Hilaire on this very important subject. Thank you. I also want to take a water if you want to have some water.
Feel a sneeze or a cough coming. Covering your mouth prevents the spread of germs. You probably knew that. But the way you cover up also matters. And that means breaking a habit you've held near and dear all your life. Cover your nose and mouth with your flexed elbow or a tissue, not your hands. Discard the used tissue immediately. Then wash your hands. Help stop the spread of germs. Remember, your health is your responsibility.
A message by the Health Promotion Unit of the Ministry of Health, Wellness and New Health Investment, Dominica.
Le ou senti ou pral estenye ou bien tousse, couvri bouche ou, empêcher partager virus. Peut-être ou kon sa déjà, mais façon ou couvrir bouche ou très important. Couvrir nez ak bouche ou ak coup de poignet ou, ak papier hygiénique, c'est pas ak main. Jeter papier hygiénique là immédiatement après laver main. En aider suspendre gaye germe microbe. Songez, santé ou c'est responsabilité ou.
A message by the Health Promotion Unit of the Ministry of Health, Wellness and New Health Investment, Dominica.
Well, thank you very much. Welcome back to our discussion on NCDs, and we're focusing specifically on diabetes and hypertension and the associated risk factors. And we have a very distinguished panel helping us through this critical and important subject. I think, Dr. Jolly, there's also the issue, as I understand it. So you have a patient who comes to you.
Yes.
You give a prescription.
Yes.
Then that person, I understand, goes to the public health system.
That's correct.
But that person cannot access the medicine because he came from
A private
practitioner.
Yes, I'm not the only physician or private physician who's experienced this, whereby we may see patients who may have usually attended health centers, and we write prescriptions either for their chronic disease medications, and then when they head to the pharmacy, they are denied their medications, and usually it's their blood pressure, their diabetes medications. And so patients have frequently had to come back to us, or they've had to see a public physician who then has to rewrite the prescription before they will serve them at the public pharmacy.
I don't know about this, but certainly it's something that we have to investigate and to see how it can be addressed. To me, it makes no sense to me, but I'm sure they may have an explanation for it. But the intention is never to deny anybody access to medicine. It's procured for the population. So it's something that we need to look on. I'm sure the health officials are following this program tonight, and they'll take note of this. Now, last week we observed World Diabetes Day and heard from our Minister for Health that government is putting measures in place to address the high incidence of diabetes among our population through increased screening and treatment. Dr. Sentile, can you speak to the public about some of these measures, please?
Well, yes, as a matter of fact, there are quite a number of measures that are in place now. The eye center, they are doing screening. There's primary health care clinic that are teaching people about the foot care, how to take care of your foot, the chronic disease self-management system. There is a cabinet trying to put in place laws to govern the taxes on tobacco and places where people cannot smoke, and also ban on ads for alcohol and so on. There, we also liaise with the OECS and CAFA to develop diabetes management plans. And in the school system, we are also trying to have students in terms of banning sweetened foods and so on, and also gardening with the schools, to grow what you eat. So these are some of the measures that are actually in place.
Yes. So one of the main programs that we have in terms of the diabetic retinopathy, and of course Dr. Shillingford Ricketts is one of the main leaders of national ophthalmologists in that, and this is continuous, it's ongoing, and what we want to happen is that there's an increased risk of persons with diabetes to have diabetic retinopathy. Okay, and what it causes is blindness in persons with diabetes. And what we want to happen is that we want every year that persons who have diabetes to access these services. And where can you get these services? At the hospital, at PMH, and also in every health district in Dominica. So we have two persons we call screener graders. And what they do a photo or they take a picture of the eye, the retina, and it will be able to tell them what stage, if you have diabetes retinopathy, or what stage of it you are at. And then you would be referred for advanced care. So how you do that? You just contact your nurse and inform her. She will get to your appointment, and when any of the screener graders come to your area, you'll be able to see them. Okay, so we would really like you. This is a service free of charge to the public. So every year, all our diabetics, please access your health center and have your photos done to check for diabetic retinopathy.
Okay, thank you very much. A question from WhatsApp, it says, what does numbness in the fingers indicate to a diabetic? Ms. Jolly? Dr. Jolly, sorry?
So it really means that you have nerve damage at least up to your knees. So it means that you have nerve damage extending at least from your toes, at least up to your knees, before it gets to your fingers. So it means that either you have had poorly controlled diabetes over an extended period of time, but I also want to let the public know that the complications of diabetes can also show up in somebody who has pre-diabetes as well. So it's not a good sign when you have numbness in your fingers, and something you should be very careful about, because we use our hands for cooking, and there are many people who have had to retire because their profession requires the use of their fingers, and once they develop numbness in their fingers, they're no longer able to work.
Okay. Now, the Ministry of Health also has a wellness mandate, and of course, Ms. Stillenford, you are the head of the education.
Yes, health promotion.
Health promotion unit,
yes,
of the ministry. You are at the forefront of providing the public with information, mainly in a preventive,
yes,
posture. Though you do, treatment,
yes, yes,
education, but more preventive. What activities are undertaken to help reduce the risk factors associated with hypertension and diabetes?
Okay, so there are a number of things done. One of them would include something we call the chronic disease self-management program, where we plan workshops with members of the community to teach them how to self-manage and to keep themselves healthy. Another is in terms of nutrition. Sadly, PM, we only have one nutritionist, and we need more, who goes to the different health districts, health centers, and touch on nutrition, diet, to the schools, for community groups and corporate businesses. We develop information such as prevention for children between the ages of 5 to 12 years. So for instance, most recently, we developed one on no tobacco, since tobacco is one of the main risk factors. And what we have noticed that tobacco is a gateway drug to a number of teens. So what would happen is that they would try smoking tobacco, and then they may move to ganja or marijuana. We also develop a booklet for children within the primary school ages in terms of diabetes, to know about diabetes, what are the signs and symptoms, and if maybe someone at their home may be experiencing something, how would they react to it. These are just some of the few. We spoke earlier in terms of the policies that we want implemented in terms of the school nutrition policy. And PM, I must say that if we really implement this policy, that it will go a long way in protecting and reducing childhood obesity in Dominica. Also, there's something I think that needs to be done in terms of our primary healthcare system. There needs to be a reorientation of the system. Gone are the days that nurses, well, we continue to be the backbone of primary healthcare, the nurse. But right now the demands and the requirements of the public, and also this changing atmosphere, and in terms of climate change, where we're having so many diseases, new emergence, and also disasters that affect our persons and NCDs. So we really need to change the structure. For one, to change the mindset of what the health center is supposed to be, it needs to be changed to a wellness center. We do not want, if we speak prevention, we do not want people coming to the health center only when they are ill, PM. We want them to come when they are well. We want them to come as a family. So when you go to the health center, you, your wife, and the children go at the same time. We would like the health centers to be a one-stop center. So when I come to see doctor and I come to get my medication, if doctor identifies that I need to see a nutritionist, I go to the nutritionist. If I have a foot issue, I go to the podiatrist. If I need to have a meal plan or to plan a strategy, there's a health educator there to give me that information. So we need to just, you know.
So your advice is that we need to have an orientation of the primary healthcare system, what we currently call health centers. We should really be calling them in the third decade of the 21st century wellness centers.
Yes, PM.
Okay. Now, the government just built a new health center in my village, Vekas, and we may very well take your advice on this. And when we are formally commissioning this center, we shall call it the Wellness Center. Okay.
Yes, PM.
Okay, so we shall start in Vekas, Dr. McIntyre. We shall start in Vekas, and we shall call the Vekas Health Center the Vekas Wellness Center. Okay, and I will get the appropriate sign put up. Now, please, go ahead.
One of the questions I have...
One second, doctor. Let me get a telephone call there, please.
Okay.
Caller, please.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, good evening. I'm calling from Senegal.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I'm actually from Girardin, but I'm living in Senegal for years now, and I watch the program every Sunday.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I am diabetic for many years myself, and you had Alex Boyd-Knight, a former speaker, some weeks ago. She did say something startling to me, that a doctor in St. Lucia informed her that farine is one of the better cereals that a diabetic should use as against all what the conventional ones would we have. I don't know if your panelists can expound on that a little, because as diabetics, we find it very difficult to, the choices are not many, there's so many things that are not good for us. And when we think something is good, it's not good, and this and that. So, you know, I mean, farine is very prevalent, it's natural and this and that, but I don't know if they can expound on that subject of whether farine is better for diabetics than the conventional cereals. I'd appreciate to know that. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you very much, Colin. All the best.
Most likely, in terms of the farine, it has a lower glycemic index. But what we really want to say to you is moderation. Right? Moderation and portion sizes. Because even if you eat farine as opposed to the other form of processed cereals, and you eat too much, the result will be the same.
Okay. So you can have it, but in moderation.
In moderation.
Small portions. We have another telephone call. Please. Hello.
Yes, good evening, Ian.
Good evening to you, my friend.
Yeah, and of course to your panelists, listening for the essentially and rally. It's a very important discussion this evening. I have just a few things to discuss on quickly. One of the things I want to touch on is I see most times people concentrate on people who are diabetic. But what about people who are borderline being diabetic? Yeah? Can we not focus a lot more on these type of people in terms of educating them and help them not to become diabetic? Because diabetes cannot be reversed. But borderline, if you're borderline, you can reverse that if you eat properly and you exercise and you do whatever you have to do. You don't require medication for those things. But for diabetes, you require medication. So can you focus a little more on that?
Thank
Secondly,
you.
we have things like people who have the tablets. And, you know, some homes are like pharmacies. People don't take the tablets. Do you think that if we have, for example, in the pharmacies, where we have a counselor, or in the hospital or something like that, a counselor, to really educate the people before just giving the person a tablet and saying and just tell them take one twice a day or whatever. You sit down with them and you educate them on the importance of taking the medication and so on, and the side effects it can have, what you should do if you take it, and this is the side effect that you see, and so on and so forth. Can we have that in pharmacy and so on?
Sure.
When I speak with people, sounds funny a bit. I know people who like our broth, like our big cash machine and our yam and our feed and so on. But you will find people eating those hot food, and then they take a nice big cold glass passion fruit juice with ice in that. Does that contribute towards obesity? How healthy is that? That's just something I just noticed and I wanted to drop this on. So just these three things I want to talk about. So you have a good evening, people I'm listening to.
Thank you very much. Now, we can juxtapose his question about borderline diabetes with a WhatsApp question, which says, can diabetes and high blood pressure be reversed and completely cured? And with his question on how do we cause someone who is borderline diabetes to reverse that trend or that path towards diabetes?
So there's only two types of people in this world. Those who have diabetes and the rest of us are on our way to develop diabetes. So there is no borderline diabetes. You either have diabetes or you're going to develop it sometime in the future if you don't look at your lifestyle, which would include your diet and your exercise or your physical activity pattern. So there is no trace of diabetes. There is no borderline diabetes. Sometimes folks say there might be a good diabetes. There is no good diabetes. All of it. The thing is that you can develop the complications of diabetes even in the pre-diabetic state. And so everybody really should be adherent to a healthy diet and lifestyle. And when we talk about the plate method, what we've spoken about in terms of having the vegetables, limiting your amount of carbs, that's not just for people who have diabetes, that is for everybody. If you have a family member who has been diagnosed with diabetes, that's just more of a reason to be more adherent to that diet and to increase your physical activity. To the next question, can diabetes and high blood pressure be reversed and completely cured? I have seen that happen, but that requires gastric bypass surgery. And so what it does is that it places the diabetes and high blood pressure into remission. However, if the person is not adherent to the diet and lifestyle changes post-surgery, then those conditions can reappear. The other thing that has been shown to reduce or to reverse is the consumption of a whole foods plant-based diet, which means that you eat only plants and that you eliminate the consumption of all animals and animal products. So not just meat or fish, but also milk, eggs, and cheese, or anything that comes from an animal, in which case you would be vegan. So those are the two. And I share this with everybody who comes into my office, and they tell me, Doc, God put the animals on the planet for us to eat.
Now, there is also the view which I wanted to address, that only quote-unquote fat people succumb to diabetes or hypertension. Is that the reality, or do we have situations where slim people end up with diabetes and hypertension?
Certainly we do. Certainly
and suffer from strokes?
Yes, certainly, because of what causes diabetes, pancreas. You can be lean, you can be very lean and still end up probably with a virus that affect the pancreas, and you can end up with diabetes. So,
but also, it's not for us to take for granted that folks who are slender can somehow eat what they want, because you can appear slender on the outside, but if your organs, including your heart, your liver, is surrounded by fat, which we call thin on the outside but fat on the inside, then you can develop insulin resistance, meaning that the insulin does not have its desired action, and you can develop diabetes that way as well. Also, if you're slender and you engage in activities that for some reason damages the pancreas, so alcohol consumption, then you could end up with diabetes that way as well. So it's a note that really and truly that we all have to be cautious, regardless of whether we are slender or not. to be really take these lifestyle measures seriously.
So you really have to do lifestyles.
Yeah.
Operating with them.
PM, I just wanted to add a few things there. One of the callers mentioned in terms of counseling of patients when they receive their medications, and I am totally in agreement with what he said. And not just counseling in terms of when medications are prescribed, but also counseling when a diagnosis is made. I mean, sometimes when we tell people you are diabetic, or you have high blood pressure, or you have heart disease, I mean, that can be a news of death to them if they do not understand and believe that they have the self-efficacy to manage it and to live a normal life. So we have to continuously tell persons and provide an environment to show persons that it is not the end of the world. They can live long, healthy lives with these conditions. So in terms of their mental health, after a person is diagnosed with a condition like this, they must receive some form of counseling in terms of what the condition is, and even show the benefits of how it can change your life and your entire family life. Because as Dr. Jolly was saying, if one person in the family is diagnosed with diabetes, most likely somebody else in the family also have it. So the change of lifestyle has to do with the entire family. You know, let them see the bright side. And with that, if their mentality is changed, then the fact their compliance to medication and all of the other things we prescribe is even better. And also, PM, we spoke in terms of our health system as to some of the things that we can do to improve. But there's the part that the public have the responsibility to their own health. You understand? So we want you to take the responsibility. You frequent the health center, some of you never, or the health system, right? Most of the time is spent at work, where you worship, where you play. So we need you as well to take that right choice in terms of self-management. I also want to talk to some of our corporate businesses. And we are seeing that, you know, some of them may be burdened with a number of sickness and absenteeism. And these are people that you do not get any product from them, production, because they are sick, and yet still you have to pay. Invest in a work wellness program. Because what you will see happening, if you have a wellness program at work where you get persons to exercise and eat healthy, and you bring in persons to inform and educate them, you're going to have healthier workers. And then you will start seeing that the money you'll be spending on sick leave with no production, right, put into a wellness will be improved.
Some years ago, I proposed to the public service that each ministry would leave work early, one day a week, and go to the stadium over here to exercise.
Yes.
Did that work?
Some did it, but maybe less than 0.2%. I'm hoping that's something that we could, and it was really to draw attention to the need to exercise, and so that we could see this continuing and replicated on an ongoing basis in different areas, because the reality is the more you get developed, is the greater we have access to amenities and to services. So things we did before, I walked from school to and from school twice a day. I go up to school in the morning, go down for lunch at 12, and walk back up. And most times we would run down and run up. But now the children are picked up in the front door, taken to school, they jump back into the vehicle, back home, and so forth. So the physical activity that one had before, has been reduced dramatically because of access to amenities and to services. And so this is where the schools are important. I am concerned that we have taken physical education and turned it into a CXC subject, and now it has become a study in theory rather than a study in practice. And this is a concern that we have to look at and ensure that we have more physical activity at school, so that kids can go home and want to do the same things as well, and get everybody involved. So there are a lot of changes that we have to be mindful of, that we need to arrest, and some that we need to really do more of. So very critical. Please,
Doctor. So I wanted to ask Nurse Linford, one of the things you spoke about, and we've been talking all day about the men and why they have, why we're seeing more amputations and why they don't make it to the doctor. And you spoke about the new health center being a wellness center. would a difference in primary care, could a difference look like instead of the patients or the clients coming to that wellness center, would we consider reversing it, whereby we would go out to the places, to the communities, where we would find susceptible patients? For example, a lot of men go get their hair cut, and so would we consider either a doctor and a nurse going to the barber shop and spending some time there, checking blood pressures and blood sugars, identifying those at risk, and then directing them to the health center or to places, for example, when we have sporting events like football or cricket, doing screenings at those events, and finding those folks who won't typically make it to the health center, who are busy for one reason or another. Would you consider doing that?
Dr. Jolly, that is exactly what part of reorientation of the primary healthcare system is all about.
Okay.
So it's not just changing in terms of the type of professionals or the human resource that with special skills to deal with special people, but it also means taking the services to the population. It also means possibly changing the times as which the health center operates. So for instance, you go to the health center and by 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, the clinics are done. There are persons who work in the day and may want to have an evening. Or for instance, our men, they do not like accessing the health center within the week. You may have to have a special clinic on a Saturday, to accommodate them. So all of this is part of reorienting the health services, taking it to them, changing the times and the way we do things, and that way I think we can empower our population better.
Okay.
Now, from your assessment as health professionals, how do you think the prevalence of NCDs threaten or attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals?
Oh, most significantly, because one of the things we established very earlier on, PM, is that we are seeing a change from older persons having these communicable diseases to a younger population, and that's our workforce. So you can imagine if we have persons coming up, our men with disabilities, it's going to affect their ability to work. That alone puts a damper. A lot of our cost of medications in terms of dialysis, instead it will be placed in preventative. Now we have to put it into secondary and tertiary. Okay, so we are seeing a lot of more young, ill persons who are unable to work, to improve our economy. And also we are still having older persons living longer. So more monies has to be placed, because we know as you get older, your likelihood of getting NCDs increases. So we have to take care of our elder population. Our young persons who are supposed to work and continue and empower the country are getting ill, and now we have to take care of them even more.
Because I mean, you're right. I know a guy who's 42 years old, and he got his limb amputated. Now, this is a working guy. He has a family. Now he cannot function the way he did. And one can understand that he has moved now from being able to take care of himself to being dependent, and the impact on the socio-economic standing of his family. So it's really important for us to be more aggressive at the primary healthcare level, and the information overload if we have to, and looking at our school's curriculum. And
taxation.
And you mentioned taxation, that we need to look at. So there are a number of actions that we need to take now. What public policy measures can we take to address this? Is there a need for us, as I said, to reorient the primary healthcare system, Dr. Jolly, from a private sector standpoint?
I'm really glad you asked that question, because a lot of people think that it's doctors and nurses that are the ones who can address this epidemic of diabetes. But it's really people in the government, and it's really the policymakers. You actually have the biggest role in terms of addressing non-communicable diseases. It's not doctors or nurses. We are addressing folks when they already have the condition. If we have to have a vision in the next 20 years as far as reducing or eliminating, well, we probably won't eliminate non-communicable diseases, then we really have to look at putting policies in place to eliminate the sale of sugar-sweetened beverages to our children, increasing the physical activity of children, whether it is through enforcement that they have at least 60 minutes of physical activity every day, reducing the amount of time spent sedentary, at screens or in school. We also, we need to put more money towards prevention. One of the things
what are some of the actions we can take?
Okay.
Where prevention is concerned.
Where prevention. So apart from those policies, I think we need to address those who already have the condition. And in terms, we need to have earlier testing, detection, screening, and then we need to be more aggressive in terms of the treatment. But in terms of the other policies that may be put in place, I think the largest portion is probably in terms of the schools. Yes, the schools.
I'll come to you, nurse, and Dr. Sensilia on this question, but let's take a caller. Hello?
Good evening, Mr. Prime Minister.
Hi, good evening to you.
Good evening to your guest.
Good evening.
A very interesting and informative program. That is a wealth of information that we are getting, But I think Nurse Shillingford hit the nail on the head when she said about our personal responsibility. Because we may get all that information from you and from everybody else concerned. But while we have exceptions to the rules as well, but we have a personal responsibility to ourselves to make good use of that information. I just wanted to share that. Have a good night.
Sure. Thank you very much. What measures can we take policy-wise to help fight the prevalence of CNCDs?
Well, I think we should use more of the media, social media, both the radios, more jingles, to educate people, education, information, and to encounter people and teach them. Let them know what's going on. I think that is the key to move us forward to the next level. People must be educated and understand what is being done. And as Nurse said, they have to have a responsibility to themselves and to the state.
Well, PM, I agree with education, but we have been doing that so much, and a lot of the risk factors in terms of tobacco and the use of alcohol, we cannot compete with advertisement in terms of alcohol and tobacco products. It's very difficult. However, if we implement different policies and laws, so for instance, the FCTC, which is the Framework Convention of Tobacco Control, which Dominica has signed on to, we need to get to the point that we implement these control measures. One of it would be in terms of eliminating advertising of these types of drugs, promotions, and even sponsorship for schools and different activities. It will also help us in terms of education and information, because a simple thing like tobacco, the package, right now you would have to put over 75%, over 50% of the ill effects of tobacco on the package, and that is package and labeling. So these are some of it. So we need to get these policies in place together with other things like introduction of the school nutrition, implementation of the school nutrition policy, the NCD policy. But one of the key things I'm concerned about is we need to take a look at the determinants of health, right? Because that is what, no matter how much we educate and we inform, if the person's education is still, their literacy level is still low, if they do not live in a proper environment, if they do not have a job, if, there are so many determinants that can prevent them. So we educate, we inform them, but when they go to their homes where they live most, we are not there.
Why isn't there one of the problems I have with the public service is that there is no coordination among entities. So if a patient comes to you as a nurse or doctor in the public healthcare system, and that person has a health issue, but he or she may need social welfare assistance, I believe we should send a note to the social welfare department to have an investigation done of this person so that the person has the means of caring for himself. If the person has a housing condition that we've picked up through our same outreach in terms of visitation to the homes. A report should come back to the center to be sent to the Ministry of Housing. I find a lot of this, unfortunately or fortunately, it is left to parliamentarians to do. So I find myself being a housing officer, the social welfare officer, and the list goes on and on. So I think there has to be a greater coordination, and I think it's a point we made when we were having discussion sometime last week, that we maybe need to look at these centers where there can be a consolidation of all the human resources available.
Correct.
You see, so I think in all the reorientation, we really need to pay attention to this, and so that we can help these citizens much more than we are currently doing. One, in preventing these things from happening. Two, very, very importantly, in managing the suffering from diabetes or hypertension.
Yes, PM, and that is exactly. In fact, there's a friend of mine who says, you're cooking with gas. PS, you're cooking with PM, you're cooking with gas.
Okay.
Because this is really, it takes. You see how we say tourism is everybody business, health is everybody business. So it has to be that collaborative approach. So it's not just at the health center level and the services we do. What about agriculture in terms of backyard gardening? Are you producing food to the schools?
Yeah.
You know, how have you influenced? You know, as you say, our social system. You know, if we identify the problem is that they have all the information, but they do not have the money, or their literacy level is next to none. You know, are you going to empower them to at least put them to the level where they can read and understand? You know, so we have to, fisheries. Are we providing fish even to our hospital?
So there should really be, joint visits of providers. So the district nurse is going to a visit. Why can't the agricultural extension officer come along?
That is correct.
Why can't the social welfare officer come along? So we can speak about backyard gardening and the importance of it. So it's not just about seeing your medication book or your doctor's book or seeing your prescription, but a holistic approach towards helping and assisting these citizens. Yes, Dr. Jolly.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Is that I think we have to be more holistically minded as medical professionals, and we really we don't get enough education as far as nutrition is concerned. But like Mrs. Shillingford said, one of the policies we need to look at is really our agricultural policy. That's one of the main things in other countries. But I think we have good food here, and the question is, why are we not consuming most of it, or so.
Let's take our final question there on WhatsApp. It's a very long question, but I suspect it's an important one. It's an important one. He says, I recently visited my pops, and while checking his meds, realized he was taking metformin, 3 times a day, because the prescription said after meals. So after every meal he took it. He is in his 80s and already at risk for kidney failure. My question is, do you think there is a direct relationship between the increase in the number of people on dialysis and the present medication formula?
I do think there needs to be more options in terms of the public service, because the options are limited. Many people are not able to tolerate the regular metformin because it causes a lot of upset stomach and diarrhea. And the other option should not be given on its own. And then there is a great fear of insulin. However, unfortunately, many of the medications, and this is something that the insurance companies knows as well, is that many of the other options are more expensive. So if you're not able to tolerate these metformins and the glyburide, then the cost of treating diabetes goes up significantly. But then the cost of not treating diabetes is also significant as well. So it's really a situation where sometimes you're between a rock and a hard place.
So you say that we need to have more options for treatment.
Absolutely.
But why don't we have more options? I mean,
Why we don't have more options? Well, it depends on what is available to us from the OECS and so on and so forth.
I would really like to know why don't we have
Yeah,
more
because
options?
PM, there's a certain types of drugs, certain drugs that we, through our OECS, PPM, where we get medications through bulk, you know. Yes, so that's where we access our medications.
Yeah, but I don't think we should. I don't think we should keep ourselves in this straitjacket. If there are other options available, and the current option that we have may not be something for everybody. I think we need to look at different options, even outside of the OECS procurement program. And so we'll have a discussion on this, but I'm taking note of this point. Can we get some final comments from you, Dr. Jolly, please?
Well, I enjoyed this conversation tremendously. Thank you for inviting me and having me on the panel. But I hope our listeners took away really the fact that type 2 diabetes or the non-communicable diseases are a major problem in Dominica, in the region, and across the world. And I think we really need to take serious steps in order to address it. I'm glad that we've spoken about the diet and lifestyle measures that each and every person out there can take to prevent diabetes, but also to address it. And I hope that, having spoken to you, that you've heard from us in terms of some of the policy changes that we really need to take a look at and to take seriously, because the cost of diabetes is not going down, it's going up.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes?
Yeah, so I just want to say leave a key things with the population based on what we discussed, in that you need to know your status. That's the only way. If your diabetes, your blood sugar, your blood pressure is being controlled properly and it is not high in your body. So monitor your blood sugar, monitor your blood pressures. We need you to check your feet, okay? Because we know that in terms of amputations and ulcers are very prevalent in terms of diabetes. So check your feet at least once a day. If you're unable to see it properly, have one of your family members do it for you. Use a mirror. We want you, those of you who are diabetic, to please access the diabetic retinopathy program. Go to have your photos taken. It is free of charge, and you can get it at all of the health centers, the health districts, and in a hospital. You need to do that once a year. This is what I would want to.
Thank you very much. Doc?
I just want to say thanks for having me here tonight. And I want to let the people know that we are just starting. There's a lot of work to be done, and it takes not only the healthcare providers, but also individual persons to take the responsibility for their own health. So the information and getting to know what is necessary to move forward, and the constant back and forth between the healthcare providers and the patients or clients is what is needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, I can say to you, the panelists, that I intend to take even a heightened participation in the fight against NCDs in the country, myself personally, and so we intend to resuscitate the National Commission on NCDs and look at some of the additional policy measures that we need to take to help our society fight this. I believe that the presence of CNCD has a major impact on our economy and our future. If we have productive people who are now removed from the workforce, we have a challenge. And I think we can manage it, but we all must play our part in this regard. I will invite you to the cabinet in 2 weeks' time, not this week, but the following week, so you can assist us with stress management. The way I manage stress is that I don't worry about anything I don't have control over. You know, and when you feel overwhelmed and you follow the biblical dictates, you look to the mountain from whence your strength cometh, and you go into a quiet place where you find peace. And I find peace on the farm, I find peace in planting, I find peace in harvesting and giving out. So this is how I manage it, but I look forward to your expert advice on how do I manage this high stress job with all of its challenges. But we look forward to your guidance in the cabinet on this. I also want to extend my deepest condolences to the Jackson family of Cassie Bruce on the passing of Nurse Jackson. Nurse Jackson unfortunately passed away from complications related to COVID-19. She was a resident in the United Kingdom. I knew her personally, wonderful nurse, very compassionate, very empathetic, a very caring nurse. And I spoke to her by WhatsApp about a month ago. She just simply just said hi to me, and I have had the occasion to interact with her on duty. Very, very, very conscientious nurse, and I'm personally saddened by a loss, by a death, and of course the loss of the family. And so on behalf of myself, my family, the government of Dominica, the people of Dominica, and all the health providers, we want to extend our sincere condolences to the family of our dear nurse Jackson. May her soul rest in peace, and may the Lord grant the family and friends the strength and the courage to deal with this tragic loss. And words really can't express my feelings now. And of course, I would like to congratulate Harlem FC for their championship today. I heard it was a very keenly contested encounter, and Harlem FC was victorious on this. Next week, I will switch the position and be the one who questions will be asked out. So I will invite again some journalists back to ask me whatever question they wish to ask me on behalf of the people of Dominica. Any question to the Prime Minister next week Sunday on the state of affairs of the country and so forth. Again, let us go forth and serve our God and our country. We're in a challenging period, but in every challenging period, in every disappointment, there are blessings, and we just need to take advantage of the blessings and so forth. And always, never see the glass half empty, but see it half full. And ask yourself, what can I do to cause the glass to get to the brim and even overflow into our saucer in this country? We must live by faith, but we must also be sensible as human beings. God bless our country. God bless your families. Go forth and be productive. Give your employer a fair day's work if you want a fair day's pay. Because in this period, it calls on us to be even more productive. And because we should all be grateful that we have a job to go to in these very difficult and challenging times. Our prayers go out to our friends in Europe and North America who continue to confront this dreaded virus, and our hope and prayer is that they will overcome this with hope. Really hope, no deaths, but the reality is people are dying, unfortunately, and so on. So that's the reality of life. Once there is life, there must be death, and we say praise God to this. God bless. Thank you very much.
The coronavirus disease may spread when people touch contaminated surfaces and then touch their face. Regular cleaning and disinfecting of surfaces that are frequent touch points helps to prevent disease spread. Every home is different, but common high-touch surfaces include door handles, tables and chairs, handrails, kitchen and bathroom surfaces, taps, light switches, phones, computers, and remote controls. Nurse and health educator Sabrina Bernard will share guidelines with you on general cleaning of all types of surfaces, including in the home and in the office, and the type of disinfectant that should be used.
Approved cleaning solutions used to clean surfaces: Lysol liquid, Lysol wipes, alcohol 70% and above, alcohol wipes 70% and above, 10 ounces of bleach in 1 gallon of water, or quarter cup bleach in 1 gallon of water. Surfaces that should be sanitized in the offices are office desks, chairs, keyboards, mouse, phones, printers, scanners, cubicles, doorknobs, and the light switch. For the home, tabletops and countertops, chairs, doorknobs, light switch, toilets, bathrooms, cupboard knobs and holders, and stair rails. How long do COVID-19 last on surfaces? On aluminum, 2 to 8 hours. On surgical gloves, 8 hours. On steel, 48 hours. On wood, 4 days. On glass, 4 days. On paper, 4 to 5 days. And on plastic, 5 days.